I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Tom?
Tom? I didn't see Jeff Penrose.
Tom Baconi from Standpoint. Just put on the open time to speak. After the board meeting with the approval of the new textbooks, one of the things I wanted to take a look at was, because I think it's sort of $450,000 of spending, kind of how our school district compared to other school districts. So just like how our school board puts all the information on the meetings online, so do other school districts. So I compared what Lake Pend Oreille School District had against school districts in Florida, in Texas, and Kansas. And one of the things I thought was pretty interesting is, expecting, actually I was kind of doing it, hoping to find an opportunity to maybe give some more support for either negotiations or something like that. But one of the key things that I found is that when we look at like the freight markups, I think it was 4.5%. That compared to the freight costs of up to 10%, 10.5% in Texas and Florida. So just kind of taking a look at some of that, the money, that's essentially a savings of about, I think it was like $30,000 to $40,000 for the school district. So anyway, just wanted to share that piece of information out there, and appreciate you guys taking care of our money.
Thanks, Tom.
I appreciate you researching them.
I know, I was hoping to find something better.
Okay, so our next item is going to be the Piper Jaffray and Holly Troxy presentation. I'm going to hand this over to our CFOO, Lisa Howells, to make the introductions, please.
Yeah, good evening. And it's definitely my pleasure to introduce Eric Herringer from Piper Jaffray out of Boise, and Danielle Quaid from Holly Troxel, which also has a Boise, but she's based out of the Coeur d'Alene office. And jointly tonight, with Eric going first, followed by Danielle, they are going to present some details on how our district may leverage plant facility levy funds through annual appropriation lease financing. I've been talking to the board and to our facilities committee over the last several months that this has become an option, and they are the experts and are here to share a more comprehensive explanation for you tonight.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Lisa. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Eric Herringer with Piper Jaffray. It's a good introduction. I'm here to talk about how we could structure a financing that would utilize a plant facility levy to generate funds up front to build most or all of the projects you're contemplating with the plant levy right away, as opposed to waiting for the money to come in and do a pay-as-you-go model. One thing that I need to disclose is that at Piper Jaffray, we're a broker-dealer. We're regulated by lots of regulators, the SEC, the MSRB. And I'm supposed to tell you that our role is that we can provide advice about the timing, structure, repayment terms for a financing that would be a financing that would go out into the capital markets or even placed with a bank as a security. We can do that in our role as a underwriter or replacement agent, knowing that as an underwriter or replacement agent, we're working with investors. And so when we're working with investors, we're trying to make sure that the securities are structured properly so that they are protected. So because of that, we can't have a fiduciary responsibility in our role as an underwriter. And that's what I'm supposed to describe to you before I start talking. So our role, if you were to use us to do a financing, our role would be as an underwriter. We would actually underwrite the securities and find investors, or actually place them with different banking institutions and negotiate terms with those investors and banks. So any questions on that? That's not what you wanted to have me come talk about. So kind of to review the plant levy, and I think some of this information you already have. In Idaho, we can do, a school district in Idaho can do a plant facility levy. And It can provide funds for capital repair, for new construction, for major maintenance, for equipment. Anything you can do with bonds, you can do with a plant levy. The plant levy can be authorized for up to 10 years. It can be for less, but 10 years is the max. If you know probably that a supplemental levy, which is a different type of levy, it's for operations, can be levied for up to 2 years. So there's a big difference there. And it's different than a bond. A bond, you can levy sort of whatever you have to levy to repay the principal and interest on the bond. So there's 3 different kinds of voted levies for a school district. We're talking here about a plant levy, which I think you're all familiar with. The nice thing about the plant levy is the voter threshold can be lower. And it's based on this sliding scale of if the resulting property tax rate combined for a bond and a plant is less than 0.2%, it only requires a 55% approval. If it's higher than 0.2 but less than 0.3, it requires 60%, and if it's over 0.3, it requires 66, or 2/3. Plant levies cannot be used for operations. It's all for capital-related type things and equipment. The challenge with the plant levy for large projects is the cash flow. Because the plant levy money comes in with your property tax, twice, basically in big chunks twice a year, and over a 10-year period. Different than a bond where you sell the bond up front, you get all the money up front and go build your project. With the plant money, it comes in over time. So how do we take that cash flow and leverage it to get projects built up front? And that's what I think we want to hear from. So on the 55% approval, and I think Lisa Halls has already provided this calculation here. What you do is you look at last year's market value for the school district, the taxable market value, which is the $4.36 billion, and you do the math, and 0.2% of that is $8,737,827. So as long as the first year levy is that amount or less, the voter approval requirement is 55%. And I know Lisa's done a nice job talking to the Idaho Tax Commission to review this and make sure these numbers square. But they also square with the information that I have too. So I agree with that. The other thing that is unique with the plant levy is that the first year is capped at a minimum dollar amount, but future years can actually capture larger dollar amounts if as long as the tax rate stays below that 0.2%. And in this case, I did it at this is 0.002, which is 0.2%. And these numbers should look familiar. I think Lisa might have reviewed these with you as well. Is that assuming your market value grows at 2% per year, you go from 4.3 billion, 4.4 billion, 4.5, and this 0.002 multiplier would generate higher dollars. Okay. The ballot language has been written in a way, or the proposed ballot language has been written in a way that would allow you to benefit from the growth in the market value, go all the way up to that multiplier of 0.002 and collect these additional dollars. With an overall cap, an aggregate cap of 55 million, I think it's 55 million, I think that's the number. So that, if this year, in 2018 or 2019, you got 5% growth, and therefore we're collecting more dollars here, this last year would just be adjusted down so that the total over the 6 years did not exceed the 55 million. We also wanted to set a floor, because what happens if the market value goes down? And if the market value goes down and we're stuck at 0.002, then you're generating less dollars, and that becomes a concern from a financing standpoint. So the way the code is written is that you can get the $8,737,000, even if the market value goes down, you can still collect that as a minimum amount. So you multiply that by 6, and that's your floor. So that 52.4 million is your floor. The 55.1 is the cap. Any questions on that? Hopefully that's consistent with what you've heard so far. Okay. So I think that the 2% growth rate is a reasonable, number, percentage to use. We went back, I think the district's existing boundaries got established in 2000. So I think that's as far back as we can go to look at how much your market value has grown. So in 2000 it was 1.9 billion, and then it grew through these years. We had the kind of topping out here, and then the big decline in market value that you're aware of. Declining market value in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years. In this most recent year, we've seen an uptrend of 2.7%. And I watch these. I work with school districts throughout Idaho, and I only work in Idaho, so I see a lot of these market value trends for different school districts around the state. And this is a pretty common trend to see this, spike, a downward dip, and then recovery. It's taken a little bit longer for your tax base to recover, the market value, the home prices, new construction, things like that, taking a little longer. But I would fully expect to see a continuation of growth off that baseline or low point trough we saw there. Importantly, I look at this. What's the compound growth rate? If I take a long-term view of what growth rate would take me from 2000 to 2016 if it was steady, compound growth, almost 5%. So I think a 2% growth rate is reasonable, but we only have a short term. We have 6 years, and there are things that can make market values go down. So that's why I wanted to run that baseline or that minimum number and know what's our worst case scenario, because I do think you're going to see something in excess of 2%, and you'll get that 55 if you were to go with this plan. Okay, so now how does this work? And I don't know if Lisa shared this with you, but there's a recent Supreme Court case, for the Boise Auditorium District, and Danielle Quaid is an attorney to talk to you more about Supreme Court cases. She's an attorney, I'm not. But it basically said it's okay in Idaho to do an annually renewable lease without a vote. And it's not debt, because the Constitution, the Idaho Constitution has a prohibition on long-term debt beyond that goes for a period beyond 1 year, without a 2/3 approval. So what the Supreme Court said is that, hey, these leases are a 1-year commitment. You do a lease for a year, you have to renew it. The school district board would have complete legal ability to walk away each year and not reappropriate the money. Financial institutions know this. The bondholders know that there's that risk that you wouldn't renew the lease. And that therefore, because the lease takes affirmative action of the school district to pass that budget with that lease payment, that it's not a debt that goes beyond 1 year. So we can do those now because of the Supreme Court. We used to be able to do them if we got approval at the district court level on a case-by-case basis. So we've done these types of financings before, most recently for a school district, Bladen County School District in Idaho, back in 2010, 2011. But we had to go to in front of a district court to get the approval. And with the Supreme Court case, we no longer have to go that route because the Supreme Court said it's a legal structure. So, important thing is it's an annually renewable 1-year lease. You run that lease period over the same amount of years as the plant levy, and that you'd amortize the lease. The lease would amortize, those lease payments would amortize the projects you want to finance over the same 6-year term as the plant levy coming in. And presumably, the plant levy would be enough to pay for the lease. That's the concept. And at the end of the lease term, assuming you made all your lease payments, you can buy the project, the facility, for $10 or a nominal sum. don't know, we could negotiate $1. Maybe.
Usually 10.
But yeah, usually it's $10 for whatever reason, but it's some nominal sum. So you get through the 6-year lease term, you pay about $10, and the project's, the district's, title goes to the district. Danielle will maybe explore those concepts a little bit further. So why do this, and why not do pay-as-you-go? Well, the short answer is, if you can borrow an interest rate that's less than construction inflation, you're probably better off borrowing money now and building it all today. If construction inflation is 4%, you can borrow at 2%. You know, if you wait to build up the money, it's going to cost you more in the long run to wait. And that's somewhat illustrated here, not entirely, but if you look at Sandpoint Middle School, these are the original projections from the facility, I think it was the facility master plan that Dave Teeter put together. And it looked at a project cost of $29 million for Sandpoint Middle School with the project finished in the year 2019. And if you were to finance it up front and get a project underway, you could shave over $1 million off that project cost and have it finished in 2018. So Northside Elementary, again, you're shaving off about $1 million, and you're getting it in 2017 and 2020 instead of waiting until 2021 to have the doors open. So the actual construction costs less, and you get the projects sooner. But you do have this financing and interest cost, so that you have to add back in, and so it's a little bit higher overall than what we had over here in the original master plan. But part of that's due to, I think, a cost escalation that had been built up for Clark Fork Junior Senior High. But all of the projects are mostly less. So what do we got there? About a $1 million difference. And that interest and financing cost, that's an estimate that I put together based on kind of where I think the interest rate would be today, plus 0.75% cushion, just in case rates go higher. Because if I'm going to review information with the school district and say, here's how this would look, and I know interest rates are really low right now, you might not run an election until this summer at the earliest. You might not be actually locking in your interest rate until fall, and rates can go up. And so I want to make sure I've got some cushion built in here in this analysis to account for that. So I think that interest cost budget's pretty high, and it'll be, likely would be lower. Any questions so far? Okay. So here's kind of just another looking at the lease purchase financing summary. So what we end up putting together is a security called a Certificate of Participation, a COP. And it's basically the district would have a lease with a financing entity or intermediary, and that intermediary would get the lease payments and then pay those out to the investors or the bondholders. And those bondholders or investors would own certificates of participation in that lease. That's what we call it, a certificate of participation. We look to sell that if the election was approved in August and close in December. That would allow us enough time to get the documents together, get the investors lined up, do all the kind of, paperwork and credit work following an August election. So that's the day you get the money. How much money would be up to the district in terms of what you want to finance and what you want to do with pay-as-you-go. And I've got another model that shows what, the pay-as-you-go and the finance part of this. But right now, we're looking at financing these projects: Sandpoint Middle School, Northside Elementary, Sandpoint Alternative High School, and Washington Elementary School. So the only project that wouldn't be financed would be Clark Fork. And that would just be done right away with the plant money that came in the first year, because it's a smaller project amount. And you'll see it on the next slide, how that looks. And then the cost of issuance, the cost of the attorneys, the cost of getting the credit work done, replacement, about $400,000. So your budget for financing, what you try to generate with the bank loan or with the investors, we would need to generate about $48.1 million. So that's our financing budget. So all my numbers are based on financing that amount of money. And again, the interest rate we're assuming for this is 2.57%. That's got a 3/4% cushion in it. So if I did this today, and I actually talked to our trading desk yesterday, and I said, I just kind of threw the scenario at them, this is what this looks like, what, give me a ballpark on the interest rate, and they said about 1.75. All right, so that's about that 75%, or 75.75%, or 3/4% cushion. So we got room. When you look at the model, I'm going to show you on the next couple of pages. Again, remember that that's assuming a higher interest rate than what you could get today. We wouldn't need a debt service reserve. We wouldn't need to have money set aside, irrevocably to support the lease payments if you didn't make them. So that's good because then you don't have to warehouse money, or restrict money that you have, or you'd have to borrow it, which would increase the financing budget. One thing that we've been contemplating and working back and forth with the attorneys is that we wouldn't want you to have to make a lease payment. Well, I'd like you to make a lease payment right away, because then you can start amortizing that lease. But for the documents to pass legal muster, it makes sense that you wouldn't start having to make a lease payment until you got to occupy the facility, right? I mean, if you think about a lease, why would you make lease payments before you can actually go in and use what you're leasing? So given that the first project is scheduled to be done by December of 2017, we'd make that the first lease payment date, so that you wouldn't have to make lease payments. You have the cash flow. You'd have cash flow in early on in calendar year 2017 from the plant levy, but just wouldn't make sense from a legal standpoint to make the payments until the first payment until December of 2017. And the final maturity would be December of 2022. And by then, you should have pretty much all of your plant money collected. Okay. Here's kind of the real kind of meat of the matter. And this goes through sort of the basic cash flow. Here's your revenue. Plant levy coming in 2017. So this assumes that you pass in August, certify that plant levy in September of 2016 with the county. And then those taxes get levied. First half is due from the county in January of 2017, second half in July of 17. And there's some bits and pieces that come in between, but those are your big chunks of money. So your cash flow, this is all calendar year, it's not fiscal year. Calendar year 2017, 8.7 million. 2018, this is at that 2% growth we looked at on the earlier slide. So you have those revenues coming in. And then here's your use of funds. Clark Fork, remember I talked about, that wouldn't be financed. That would just be paid with the plant levy in 2017, 1.4 million. That's okay because you got 8.7 million coming in. We can't make a lease payment until the end of 2017. And when we just make an interest-only payment, there'd be no amortization that year just because you're just starting the lease. 1.9 million of interest payment, and so your total use of funds in 2017 is 3.4 million. So that 5.4 that's left over rolls back up to here, added to the plant levy revenue from 18, and you got 14.2. The annual lease payments you can see once you start amortizing on a level basis over that 5-year period, about 10 million a year. And that's more than what's coming in, but because of the carryover, that's the number that gets smaller. And you end up out here with about 1.3 million left over. And that all works great if we're getting that 2% growth. It works great if we're getting 5% because we just get bigger dollars here and this last year was less. That's fine. As long as the 55.2 or 55.1 is what we get up there. So you can see you got 1.4 million there, the lease payments are 52.4, and then the 1.3 left over. Now, I'm not sure if the plant levy is successful in August, how quickly you get underway with the projects, but you may have some expenditures before the money. Remember, the money from the financing wouldn't come in until December. And the money from the plant levy doesn't come in until January of 17. So if you did have some expenditures prior to December, you need to cash flow those with the district's existing funds or get a short-term note, which is also possible. But let's say I was just looking at the cash flow, the construction cash flows from the facility master plan, and I looked about like $3 million of expenditures that may occur. So if you could cash flow those, you could reimburse those expenditures once we got the financing complete. Or we could go out and try to get a short-term note, just to wait until the financing got completed. And of course, you get all the money up front, that 40 some odd million. It's not like interest earnings are really big right now because interest rates are so low, but that would be money held with the trustee, or the district's use, it would be invested, so there would be some interest earnings on that money that you get up front until it's spent. And none of this includes any kind of interest earnings. That would be great. Questions so far? Okay. So this is my stress test. What's my worst case scenario? So if I'm talking to an investor or a bank, and I'm trying to describe what the cash flow looks like, and I say, well, we don't know exactly how much money we're going to get through this plant levy. Again, because if the market value doesn't grow at 2% per year, or if it actually goes down, I got a floor that says I can a minimum amount of $8,737,000 per year. So now if I put that number in as my revenue, I don't change anything else, we run out of money. You don't run out of money for your projects. You run out of the plant money as a source of revenue to repay the lease. And the total is about $1.3 million. So you would see this coming, I think. If market values weren't growing or if they were going in reverse, you'd have a little bit of time to prepare for that. That wouldn't just jump up at you. But the expectation would be that if you want to keep the facilities, you need to find a way to make that last year's lease payment. Because if you don't, you lose the facilities. So there's a pretty strong incentive to figure out a way to come up with that additional money. And the investors like that. They're going to say, yeah, they want to keep Northside Elementary. They're going to have to come up with that in the final year, and they'll look at your financials and say, yeah, the district's got the financial wherewithal if they're prepared for that to do it. But that's a risk that the bondholders take, that plant levy money can't fully come in for all the projects. And that's true even if you didn't finance. Any questions so far? So some other things so I guess the summary here is this scenario that I just laid out is something that I believe we can finance. We can find financing terms that today I think would be in the 1.8% to 2% range, which I think is reasonably favorable. There are investors who will buy this kind of security with these kind of provisions. We know that. We just got the Boise Auditorium District bond sale done with the same kind of structure. We did the same kind of structure for Blaine County School District, paid with a plant levy. I've talked to a few potential investors already just to get the SNP test, and it's absolutely something that if you got the plant levy revenue and did this kind of a lease arrangement, it's a doable financing proposal that we could do and find investors at reasonable terms. So some other things, though, that I think the district needs to be thinking about is construction risk. We'll be concerned about what if the projects get delayed. Can we enter into the lease when we're expecting to enter into the lease so that we can start making those lease payments? And so that's something I'm going to have to work with legal counsel to make sure we've got some real strong sense that we're not going to be delayed in getting lease payments from the school district once we set things in motion. And construction risk of also overruns. We got a very finite budget. And it's that plant levy money that we've allocated to Clark Fork and then the rest of it allocated to make the lease payments. And, you know, if there's construction overruns, that could be a challenge. Well, the lease is outstanding. Just to provide bondholder security or certificate holder security, the plant levy money as it comes in, once you budget and appropriate that money that year, that plant levy for that year, when it comes in, we're going to want irrevocably deposited with a trustee, so that you know when it's in, it's going straight to go back to pay these certificate holders, and you don't have access to go, hey, we got this other project we want to do, and we want to spend money on that beyond what you're already doing, just to provide that security. But that's only when the lease is, you have the ability in year number 2 to cancel the lease, walk away, and you can use that plant money for whatever else you want to use it for. That's a legal distinction. You have to have that ability. Why you do that and walk away from the schools you just built, I don't know, but that's how the lease obligation works. We'd want to make the document so you really have no ability to pledge that plant levy to anything else, right? I mean, you're pretty maxed out in terms of what you're using that plant levy to do to repay the lease, and so we wouldn't want you to, as long as the lease is outstanding, use it to say, well, we'll use that as a pledge on this on a bus lease or something like that.
So you described these leases as renewable every year, and I can't even think of a scenario where you would have to change midstream. But if those are renewable every year, but yet irrevocably deposited with a trustee,
In the year,
where's that middle?
Yeah. So what I mean there is,
In the year that
in
it's
2017,
under contract.
when you renewed the lease in 2017,
Yeah.
the initial year, all those revenues, because that lease term is for that 1 year.
Yeah,
In
okay,
that 1 year, as those revenues come in, they have to go to the trustee.
yeah.
Next year's revenues,
For that year, I'm with
if
you.
you don't renew the lease, they don't have to go to the trustee.
I
Year
was-
number 2, you renew the lease, then those year's revenues go to the trustee.
I was reading that as 6-year irrevocably
Yeah.
deposited, but that's
No,
not true.
yeah.
That's on the year-to-year
Right.
contract.
We got to make the distinction. And I'm sure there's some other things that we're going to come across that we need to figure out. Because, again, we've done a few of them in Idaho, but every deal is a little bit different. And we feel like we've got a pretty good roadmap, but something always comes up that we have to address and resolve along the way. The other thing I have here, just as, kind of some background information. I usually do this when I present information to school districts on a bond or a plant levy or supplemental levies, just to look at kind of comparable tax rates. Because we're talking about, if the plant levy passes, the tax rate is $2 per thousand, or 0.2% for that plant levy for 6 years. Right now, Lake Pend Oreille School District says $1.85 per thousand in terms of its total tax rate. Most of that's the supplemental levy, as you know. But if you look around, by comparison, that's a pretty low tax rate statewide, certainly, but for Region 1, up here in Bonner County, Cooney County, Boundary County, it's at the lower end of the tax rate scale. And so even if it went up into the mid threes, it would be right there with your neighbors. The other thing I put in is the overall tax rate for not just the schools, but this is some information the Associated Taxpayers of Idaho put together every year, where they look at the average tax rate in all of the counties. So for Bonner County has the lowest tax rate per thousand, or per millage rate. I don't know if it's in the state, but it's certainly the lowest up here in this region. So that usually is I take that as a good sign that there's not an overly high tax burden. The other thing I like to look at too, just as some data points, is tax rates are fine. You have a low tax rate because you have a very big tax base. Most districts in the state don't have a $4 billion tax base, so you can generate fair amount of money. But look at how many dollars of levy, local property tax dollars are generated per student. So we took the fall of 16, fall of fiscal year 16, or fall of, this current school year enrollment, and in the current year property tax levy total, and just divide enrollment into the tax levy, and it's $2,230 per kid. It's right, right about in the middle, a little bit on the, lower end of the middle. Could probably throw out Avery because that's a different comparison. But I think it's helpful data to see kind of where that falls in terms of a levy per kid to the neighbors. And then finally, just some election data in terms of the dates. It's too late to run a May election to get on, with the county and get the paperwork filed. But if the next election is August 30 of 16, and the paperwork with the county needs to be filed no later than July 11th, I'm sure the county clerk and auditor's office will prefer to have it a little bit sooner, I would imagine. But that's kind of the deadline to make decisions on whether to pursue the election for August. I think that's it for me. Hopefully I made some sense out of that, and hopefully when Danielle gets done, we'll kind of pull the legal aspect into it, and we can answer questions.
You guys have any questions for Eric?
No,
I just have one quick question. You put like a 75 basis point, cushion for what could be 6 months away, roughly.
Yes.
So what's been historically, say the last year, or what kind of movement has there been in those tax rates?
Yeah.
Well, not the tax rates, the financing rates.
Right, we're really talking about the shorter term interest rates. And so what I'm always just general sense. So I look at a 10-year Treasury rate, and that's not a perfect thing for municipal bonds or municipal securities like this, but it's been in a range from like 230 down to like 160.
Okay.
So what's that, 70 basis points? We've been using 75 for quite some time, and the thing is, rates kind of keep going up, and then they come back down. And these shorter-term rates are being impacted a lot more by what the Fed does with the Fed funds rate, because that impacts short-term rates much more than it does long-term, like 30-year mortgage rates or things like that. So we have exposure to what the Fed's doing.
Sure.
And the Fed has really backed off on the notion of raising rates 4 times this year. It's, most people think 2, and some people are trying to think maybe not even that. I think that's plenty of cushion
Okay.
to have in place for this.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Hi there. As Lisa said, I'm Danielle Quaid, and I'm with Holly Troxel, which is a law firm that home office is in Boise, but I've been in Coeur d'Alene now for 10 years. I worked down there for quite a few years and wanted to come home. I grew up in Coeur d'Alene, and so I get the pleasure of leading a small office up there. I've done bond work my whole career, so this type of financing for school districts, hospitals, universities, the Greater Boise Auditorium District. So it's been really fun to start to do work up here and where I grew up and see projects come to fruition. So my part's probably not as exciting as Eric's. The numbers are always more fun. I always follow him. People always are like, well, now we talk about the legal documents, right? But some of this he's covered a little bit, but it is an exciting time in the law for us. Like I said, it's exciting for me, probably not for others, but this decision made will make a huge impact on the ability of municipalities and school districts and other entities to use this annual appropriation lease tool that's been available in a lot of other states for a very long time. And it does generate a lot of flexibility. It also makes just your day-to-day contracts make a lot more sense because, when you want to lease buses and other things that fall outside of this project that you're describing, we're talking about now, you have a lot more ability to do that with the comfort that the transaction is enforceable. So day-to-day things, I think, are made a lot easier by this decision as well.
Helen, could you turn
Oh,
a
sorry.
little bit so that they can hear you equally as well as we can?
Sure. Can you hear me all right? Is that better? Sorry. Okay, so Eric's covered a what we've been asked to look at is the plant facility levy at the 0.002% market value level, which requires the 55% approval, and which would generate about 55 million, and you have a little less than that needs. Again, there's a list of projects that you are intending to finance. So the thing that I'm here to talk about is a little bit about how this structure works. So the financing structure starts with a ground lease. So you own all the property where you want to build these facilities. What we would do is get a legal description that was smaller, a legal description that just included the area where the actual new building is going to be built, because I understand there are existing buildings on at least some of the sites. So we get that legal description and we would ground lease that to an intermediary. That can either be a bank, that's the simplest way to do it, but in some counties we have found that we need to use a nonprofit corporation because of the way the county assessor assesses the property. Because we want to make sure that that property remains tax exempt. You don't want to pay property tax on your school properties. So we're currently working with the assessor to figure out how they would look at that, because it's, it's still district owned ground and it's going to be district used ground, but if you put a for-profit intermediary in the middle, sometimes the county assessor looks at that and wants to charge property taxes. So we'll make that a very important kind of first step determination of whether or not we would use a bank who's experienced in acting as this intermediary, or whether we'd work with Lisa and the district to create a nonprofit that's sort of like a support entity for the district that could act in that role. We've done it both ways. In fact, the auditorium district transaction that we just worked on, we used the Urban Renewal Agency was able to act as that intermediary in Boise, but in the past they had used a nonprofit corporation. So we have some options there, but so we lease it to them. They build, I would say in quotes, because actually they assign you back the obligation to build the projects, and then you lease them back on an annual basis. They in turn take those lease revenues and they pledge them to the bondholders or the certificate holders who loan you the money for the projects. So the reason that the Supreme Court, and Eric talked about this a little bit, but the reason the Supreme Court determined that this is okay and doesn't violate the constitutional indebtedness restriction is because you really truly are only obligated for a year. Any board could change your mind anytime and not budget for those lease payments and terminate the lease. Another important term of these is that they are done all over, and the IRS has recognized that they're still treated as a project financing, so you get tax-exempt interest rates. Because if it was a true lease, you wouldn't get tax-exempt interest rates, and then you'd be looking at a rate higher than what Eric described. And then, as Eric mentioned, these used to require judicial confirmation. So we'd have to go to the district court, and we'd present all the documents, and we'd say, this is an annual obligation. Court, please tell us that this is not a debt under the Constitution, and we can move forward. We did do some transactions that way. It's a lot more expensive, so which is why everyone was so excited to get the auditorium district decision. As we talked about a little bit, this is the law in the overwhelming majority of states. Something like 47 states have a Supreme Court case that recognizes that these leases subject to annual appropriation are not debt under their state constitutions, including many state constitutions that were written very similarly to ours. And in states that are kind of our sister states located around us. And we just did have the very positive experience recently of taking the first one post-Supreme Court case to the market with the auditorium district transaction, and it was very well received. In fact, it was oversubscribed. When we were watching the bids come in for the bonds, we had at some points up to 10 times as many people seeking the bonds as wanting them. As we had to sell. So that's always an exciting thing to see that this thing, this product that we're so excited to be able to now utilize is well accepted in the marketplace. So just a little bit about the case. It was decided last October, and it held that a properly structured lease subject to annual renewal, affirmative renewal, which is a critical piece. You can't just have it automatically renew. You have to make the decision with the board each year, is not subject to debt. And I just included kind of the most important finding in the Supreme Court case there for your information. You can read it, but probably not the most important thing for you. I think this is probably the best slide for understanding the transaction. So you see you have the school district, and as I described, you have the ground lease that goes to the bank or the intermediary, And then the project is built and the financing lease goes back to the district, and with that comes the lease payments. And those are then pledged through a trust indenture, which is a legal document where they're pledged to the bond holders or certificate holders. They're actually paid and held by a trustee, as Eric was indicating. So you take your lease payments, which is made of the plant revenues, and then you pay them to the trustee, who then pays them to the certificate holders. And in turn, the certificate holders give you the project funds. So I think that's a good way to see how the pieces fit together, because it is fairly complex.
Danielle, can you back up one slide, because I
Sure.
couldn't read as fast as you were.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
Oh, did I go? I think I went too many.
Yeah, you-
Here we go.
just 1 second.
No problem.
Okay.
So in that case, the center lease is the financing lease that we're describing.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
No problem. So this is a question that everyone always wants to know. So what happens if we do non-renew on the lease? Although that's unlikely, what would happen is that you'd be required to move out of the facilities at the close of the fiscal year. But you remember that under the ground lease, you still own the land. So you ultimately are going to get the projects and the land back. But what happens in the interim while you move out is the intermediary and the trustee work together to try to find someone else to lease the facilities. It's tough to do that with these type of facilities, right? They're special purpose facilities. But they would work to try and find someone to lease them back to, and maybe even to the district on a negotiated transaction. I've seen that before, where they decided not to renew, and then ultimately they've been able to go, the district is leasing it back for a lower cost or whatever, in part of a workout of a transaction. But if they're unable to lease them back, ultimately the bondholders bear the risk that they don't get paid. And that's part of, you pay a little bit, I mean, the rates are so amazing that it doesn't seem like it, but you pay a little bit of a premium for that risk, right? Because the bondholders may not get paid. If you decide not to renew the lease, they may not get paid. They know that you're not likely to vacate 5 schools that you need for your students. So they're doing an analysis. Obviously they're looking at your revenues and your ability to repay, but they're also doing an analysis about your how essential the facilities are to you, right? Your purpose is to be a school district and run schools, and it's hard to do that if you vacate your facilities. So they definitely take that into account as part of the process when they make their credit assessment, I would say. But they do ultimately bear the risk. At the end of the day, if you non-renew and they can't lease facilities, they don't get paid. That said, so the term of the ground lease will be a little bit longer than the term of the lease, the annual appropriation lease. Obviously, the term of the ground lease will go for a longer period of time. So say we're doing a 6-year transaction, the term of the ground lease might be more like 10 years. It'll terminate when you pay off the last payment on the lease, but if you're in this situation where you've non-renewed, the market does demand that the intermediary has a little bit more time to lease out the facilities and try to get the bonds paid off. And as soon as they're paid off, then you get to buy it for $10. And ultimately at the end of the lease term, you get it back. The ground lease term, you get it back. But does that make sense? So they do have, if you non-renewed, you would be out for the rest of the term of the ground lease. Any other questions? So that's a nutshell about the structure. As Eric said, we've worked through a couple of these, one very recently. The Supreme Court case really gave us a great basis. They did a great job writing the opinion broadly so that it did encompass a lot of different types of transactions. So I think next steps, if you wanted to move forward, would be for us to work with the county assessor to determine who the intermediary is, because if we have to create a nonprofit corporation, that takes some time. I mean, it's not a huge thing, we've done it before, but it does take a little bit of time. And then obviously focus on educating your electors and asking for their support. Questions?
I have one. So it was found that we can do this according to the Constitution of Idaho.
Yes.
So if the legislature decides to pass a law that says we can't do this, then we would lose that opportunity in the future if that happened. Is that correct?
The legislature can't change the interpretation of whether whether it violates the Constitution, but they can say take away your power to lease, or further restrict your powers that way. Does that make sense? I mean, they can't.
Yeah, it does.
they
I
can't change-
I don't recall where the, the 55% and the 60% and the 66% lies. Is that in statute or is that in the
That's
Constitution?
in statute, so that they could change your ability to levy a plant facilities levy.
Okay.
Doesn't it currently say that the district has the ability to use plant levy money to lease?
Yes,
It
in fact-
specifically says it.
It does. Right now, you have a very specific statute that empowers you to lease purchase with plant facility levy funds.
Okay.
What happens if the tax assessors do not agree to the
we don't pass it on.
non-tax?
If they don't agree to collect the plant levy, or,
You know-
or on the property taxes?
Yeah, uh-huh.
Well, then we would create a nonprofit corporation that wouldn't be subject to property taxes either.
Okay, and would that take longer?
I think we could get it done. I mean, that's, if you decide to move forward with the plant and the financing, I think we could get that done in time to meet the timeline that
Joan?
Eric laid out with receiving funds in December.
Joan, what did you ask? I didn't hear clearly.
Oh, I just asked what would happen if the assessors didn't agree to the
Oh.
non-exemption.
Okay, yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, I understand. This is kind of an open-ended question, but tell me, anybody, Lisa or whoever on the board, there's that 1 million difference between just pay-as-you-go and this lease plan. What are the benefits that,
One would just be the state of our facilities today. And we
that you
know
could just do it
Yeah.
more upfront?
exactly, and get our students into facilities that are more in line with what we'd like them to be
It's
in.
the timing of it.
Exactly.
I want to feel the rest of that.
Yeah.
So if you go back, I don't know, whatever it was, 26, 28 years ago, when they ran a plant facilities levy, and they built the high school, Tom, help me out, Kootenai, Clark Fork, and Hope, okay? Through the course of that project, with construction costs going up, they ran out of money, which is why Kootenai School was not finished. And
Yeah, I remember
I
that.
mean, if you were able to buy insurance to guard against inflationary prices for construction costs, and you put that into the mix, and then you get to use the facilities way sooner than you would otherwise, I don't know, I mean, it looks prudent to me, because you can't look at the official government inflation figures to calculate anything. They're useless now. But if you look at cost of, yes, sir.
Steve, these figures, as I understand it, have an escalation clause in them, right? Is that correct?
On the interest rates or on the construction?
No, on the
Construction
cost of
costs,
construction.
yes. And they
It
could
was
even be
escalating,
left.
when we had the study done, it included price that was fixed to each facility, included an escalation clause, right? Escalation
If you're
fees.
looking at Eric Herringer's presentation, I believe on the slide that's on the left-hand part of the slide, that included a 4.5% escalation cost.
Right.
The costs on the right-hand side are predicated on starting all of the projects, architectural design, in September of 2016, with the exception of Washington School, which would be delayed because we have to vacate the students from Washington School and move them somewhere. So those costs, sorry.
Yeah, that's the pitch.
Right, so this, which was from the master facility plan, you'll see these dates are very different when they're finished, and these figures commensurately had a 4.5% construction inflation in it. These figures,
Back that
again,
out, yeah.
Clark Fork and these three projects would start and be finished, and then Washington finished 2018, 2.5 years to complete all the projects, versus Washington wouldn't be finished until 2022.
And if construction costs went up more than we estimated on that left-hand chart, that gap between the two would be even less.
So if, I think it's a long way of answering, these have some inflationary costs compared to 2016 to get us here, but not
Nearly.
the cumulative inflation cost of when we would have started the projects in the absence of at least financing options.
Well, and hopefully some interest rate cushion too, like Eric said.
Yep.
Yeah, I would have liked to show you that the financing one was cheaper, but we would have not, we
Yeah.
wouldn't have had it all, if we ran it at the current rates,
Yeah.
probably would, just because rates are so low.
Yeah,
But I
and
just-
the
I'm
other
not-
variable
I'm not-
that's
I'm
in
not
there
comfortable
that you've cushioned for.
promising
Right,
that that's
right.
be doable, so.
I just wanted somebody to kind of summarize the benefits.
And the final look would be, I mean, because we don't have to make this decision, assuming we passed, at least assuming we ran one and we passed one in August. We're not making that decision until after the levy passes, is that correct?
Correct. I mean, you could decide to only finance Sandpoint Middle School.
And we could be looking at rates at that point in time and take a tighter look to see what was going on. I think, yeah, okay.
It's a ambitious pace. There's just something in the back of my mind, I want to protect our district as well, breach of contracts, maybe somebody pulls out or a construction doesn't go exactly, I don't know what's going to happen in 2 years, but I'm just, I don't have a warm fuzzy about it. I'm just, it's because, it's just new to me and I'm sorry.
It's hard.
So I'm nervous.
To digest.
It's a lot
I
to
honestly
digest.
think the variables are minimized by doing it
So
all
quickly.
so quickly, because you can really foresee much easier between now and 2018 than all the way up to 2022. I mean, I get that adds a level of uncertainty
Yeah, and
that you can't plan for.
Construction, the actual construction, you hire people who are bonded and, they didn't just come off the street, so
Well, I understand
they're going to be able to finish what they start, hopefully on time.
Right, and for Geraldine's benefit, when we wwent through this to finish Kootenai and to extend Sagal,
Sagal, I remember that.
and Lisa was the point person on that, and we came in, on time under budget. It takes a lot of careful planning, and this is just step one. I mean, we're not making decisions here,
Yeah.
we're just getting more information.
Yeah.
And those are great questions, by the way, and I think that a lot of these are based on assumptions, and we'll get more accurate and definitive numbers when we actually have to make that decision. But I certainly, there's part of me that likes knowing what you have, as opposed to holding your breath for 6 years and and hoping that things don't get out of hand. I've seen how that ends already in this district.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
Well, thanks for having us up.
Thank you.
very
Yeah.
much.
Thank you, guys.
Take that.
Appreciate it.
Okay, you're going to introduce the
You
architect?
bet. So you guys all remember, it was about, I think, 8 weeks ago that I shared 3 or 4 options with you for Lake Pend Oreille High School. And during that meeting, we were tasked with providing you with other options on top of that and cost estimates for those projects. As a reminder, the facility study team actually recommended having LPOHS located on the SHS campus, on the Sandpoint High School campus. And with that said, there would be the core classroom work, the main classrooms, would be housed in the new building. The electives would be housed in Sandpoint High School outside of one elective potentially. There would be an elective space there, whether it was art or culinary arts. That would be the question. There is, during the work of that committee, there was a couple of thoughts going on. One, what's the most cost-effective way to do things? Well, but at the same time, what are ways that we believe we could provide even more options for the students at LPOHS. So that particular option is the only option that fits within the original budget estimate of the committee. That was the one that they brought forward. It was around $4.2 million. These other ones will be quite a bit more, but that's what we wanted you guys to be able to discuss and talk about prior to making a final decision. We're definitely not asking for you guys to make a decision tonight by any means. We are hoping, though, that with potentially at the next board meeting, a decision could be made 2 weeks from now as to where we would do this, what we will do, if anything, and where does it fit with the priority list. So that, I'm sure I forgot something that Lisa could add. We have Dave Hootery here tonight with ALSC Architects, and it's been a great pleasure to work with Dave and his team thus far. How'd I do on the name pronunciation, Lisa? Pretty good? Not bad. Okay.
My mom.
All right.
She still struggles with it sometimes.
Welcome, Dave. And so Dave's going to present some of the options that we discussed.
Great.
Thank you, folks.
Well, thank you. Thank you for letting our office, ALSC Architects, and myself work on these exciting projects. We're going to be assisting you with the secondary projects. But so far, our marching orders have been zero in on some alternative thinking for the alternative high school. So I want to kind of go over what are the common ground issues and what are some of the variables to ladder into what Mr. Woodward just described. I'll have some scenarios to go through with you. Some things that I want to kind of share is from a cost per square foot of building construction or remodel construction. The attempt is that we're as apples to apples from one comparison to the other. The size of the building may change, but the dollars per square foot for building construction, those are pretty predictable and pretty controllable by us. So we're trying to make that as apples to apples as possible. However, when we start talking about which site it goes on, then things come into play like demolition cost and variations on site improvement costs and some of those. So those are the things that start to skew the numbers, along with how many square feet we're building because of the programs that we want to put in. So what we've got is 3 sites that we've been asked to take a look at. We've been working with Sean and Matt and Lisa, and this is definitely a work in progress, but I'll take you through. We've got 3 different sites that we've been looking at, and on these 3 sites, we have 3 options on the middle school, high school site, 2 options on the existing site, and then 1 option on the Triangle site north of the district offices. So that's the way I'll work through these. This is the middle school, high school site. Probably pretty familiar with this. The bold green line is around the perimeter. And one of the important things is where an alternative high school facility would go on this site really does need to integrate with some master planning of where the middle school is going to go. And we're looking at 3 facilities potentially on this site. So this is a little bit premature thinking in the placement. However, some of the things that we have talked about is there is available real estate around the edges here that are likely not going to be impacted by what a replacement plan for the middle school is. So I'm confident that there's ample room. I think there's options on where they go. They have some pros and cons based on the subtlety of those locations. But as far as the overall site, I think the end game here is the possibility of the high school, a new middle school, and a new alternative high school. The first option that we've gone through, and kind of important things to keep track of, is the existing. And we use the facilities master plan as the starting point. And in the facilities master plan, I think it described about 14,400 square feet as the target area for the programs as Sean described. However, what currently exists on your site is about 16,343 square feet. So you've got more square footage that exists on that site than what has been kind of earmarked for the most cost-effective approach. And the reason I bring that up is that there are some very inefficient portables, some support structures, a 2-story existing building that is very inefficient from a assignable gross square footage area standpoint. So what we've said in this one is the existing area that you're in is about 16,348 square feet. You're on about 2.25 acres where you are now. The program area that we're focusing in on option one is 14,500 square feet. So it's a rounded 14,400 to 14,500. It made some math where it's a little easier. So this is on the South Division parcel. This does not include a gymnasium space. It does not include culinary arts. There are 2 spaces that currently exist on the current site, and it does not include a second classroom. That was how we were partially able to go from the size that the buildings are now to something that's a little bit leaner and meaner and factor in some inefficiencies. So 14,500 square feet is our target number. The first thing that I do is I take a look at what is the construction cost. That's the cost from the contractor to you, but that's not the total cost of the project. We just want to, that's where we can zero in on the dollars per square foot for building construction. And in this case, we're using 14,500 square feet at $200 a square foot for new construction. So about $2.9 million for new construction. One of the things I'm a firm believer in is take the cost of building construction and identify it in a place. We can control the costs of building something because we can control the quality, the scope, those items. But site is a little different. Each site has different variations that we have to deal with. So what I have done, and this is a pretty conservative but realistic approach, is on an existing site where you already have school facilities available, I'm using about 7.5% of the building construction cost to be represented for site improvement costs. Now that's going to move around in a little different ways, but that's why that number is identified here. I'm not factoring into this scenario demolition of existing buildings on North Boyer. There is some form of site demolition, and again, I said this is a work in progress depending on the location on the site at the high school that this will go. There's different variations in what site demolition will be. We may take down an existing house that's a storage building. That might be the best place, and it has a cost. We might convert an existing parking lot to building location, in which case we have to demolish the parking lot and recreate that in another place. Or we may choose a part of the site where we have to do some logging and fine grading. So at this point, I'm just leaving that as a to be determined, but I know that there is some site demolition costs that are going to come into one of these scenarios where it lands. And then off-site work. Pretty safe assumption that we've got utilities that are serving a school site. We can extend those to another school on that site. But there are going to be some things that we have to keep track of, additional sidewalk improvements, traffic control devices. So there's some things that we're going to learn more about as we go. But the focus of this emphasis is what are the dollars per square foot for construction and how many square feet are we trying to build on these sites. 30% is about what we should be using, and I think that is even the same number that was identified in the facility master plan for project-related soft costs. So when we talk about the cost of a project, we always want to make sure that we're not only talking about what is the contractor going to charge to build this, but instead what is the district going to need to charge the taxpayer in order to cover the cost of the project. So you're always going to see from me the biggest, boldest number on the sheet is going to be identified as the project budget total, and that is the construction cost and the associated project costs. So following this logic and working through this, the project budget total for 14,500 square feet of facility added to the high school, middle school site is just a little bit over $4 million. The next one we looked at, and we kind of called that the small version. The next size was the medium version, and rather than go through each and every one of the items here, just following along with the same logic, I'll show you the things that have changed. Rather than 14,500 square feet, we're at 18,000 square feet now. And the reason it's 18,000 square feet is we said we're still not going to build a gymnasium, but let's have two math classes instead of one, and let's have the culinary arts spaces that we had previously said weren't there. So we're kind of what-ifing. What does this do to us when we start to do this? And as we work our way through this process, and the not applicables and the to be determines and the none anticipated are still holding because we're still on the same site, so we're trying to stay apples to apples. Dollars per square foot for new construction is the same, and now this is right at about $5 million. So that's the value of adding those 3 extra program spaces to this project. And I'll say that these numbers are conservative on the high side. We know we can deliver them for less than that, but we also know that it is very difficult to set the bar here and discover that we need to raise it up a little higher later. We always like to start at a point and then refine it down to the sweet spot.
Could I ask a question?
Yes.
Is the second site still at the Boyer
is.
location?
Yeah, it's still at no, the second site is at the middle school, high school location.
There's three
It's just a
options
different
of that.
size building. We've gone from 14,500 square feet to 18,000, but we're still at the high school site.
Why?
Then that's just the
Because he's not done.
Yeah, and actually, the reason for that is it would contain all the current spaces that we have at LPOHS right now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
You bet. Outside of the gym. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Right. Okay.
We get to the third option, and again, this is on the same site. And we said, okay, we have gone through the process of replicating what was at the North Boyer site. We've added culinary arts back in. We've added the second classroom. What if we add the gymnasium? So now this has got virtually all of the things in there. And the gymnasium in this scenario it's about the size of what you call the gymnasium building at the North Boyer site, 2,160 square feet. So it's 2,160 square feet, which, by the way, is just a little smaller than what this space would be visually. So a little bigger. This is now 21,000 square feet. So we've had a 14,500 square foot option, an 18,000 square foot option, and a 21,000 square foot option. And this takes us up to about 5.9 million. So what's basically driving this is just the amount of square footage that we're building using the same
Right.
percentages for soft cost markups and the same dollars per square foot. The next one that we wanted to do was double back around and take a look at the current site where you are now and take a look at what are some options here. And the first option is let's retain the existing two-story building and let's replace all of the other buildings that are on site with new construction that is nicely tied to this building. In fact, we're going to have to tie it to that to meet some handicap accessibility criteria. But in this process, we've taken two looks at this site. One is keep the two-story building and add new construction to it by demolishing those miscellaneous buildings. The other scenario I'll touch on is let's take all the buildings down and replace them all and see what that does. Well, now I do it.
Darn Max.
Yeah.
Yep, there we are. So on D, this is keeping the two-story building. Same
Okay.
logic following through here. In this case, that two-story building is just a little over 8,800 square feet, 8,848 square feet. And we said we're going to remodel that. So that piece is a keeper. And the spaces that we want to replace with what's there, and one of the things when you take a look at the portables, all the circulation is outside the buildings. There's some oddities to it. So as we work through the summary of program areas, what we said is if we were to remodel the old building, the inefficient old building, and some inefficiencies can be made to go away, but a lot of them are just inherent in that kind of building construction. And we add the new program spaces, and we do all the things that we were going to do in that third scenario at the high school, which is the gymnasium, the culinary arts, the math, and all those other programs. We're up at about 24,600 square feet. So about 10,000 square feet more than the lean and mean option we started with back at the high school. I keep track of the cost of modernization or remodel, and I'm using $150 a square foot to remodel that. We can remodel buildings that aren't old and semi-historic for less than $150 a square foot, but I'd be really nervous about going in with a lesser number for a building in that condition of that vintage. Using the same $200 a square foot times the 15,700 square feet, I'm adding in again about 7.5% of site redevelopment costs. I did have to add in some building demolition costs. I've got some portables to move and some buildings to take down. So the bottom line on this one, for about 24,600 square feet, is about $6.4 million.
How about a fire? Just get rid of those trash.
I have no point of view on that.
Yeah. We didn't hear that.
The fifth option, this is option E, and again, this is the second scenario on the existing site, is let's just make the existing buildings all go away, and let's have our way with new construction on that site. Now, the one challenge, and we didn't even talk about this, is we're gonna house students somewhere while this happens, and that doesn't factor in here. I don't have temporary housing or other things in here, but that is something that needs to be considered. I went back to the size of the building we had at the middle school, high school, that had all the amenities that we wanted, which was the third scenario. It's 21,000 square feet. That's kind of the common thread through many of these options. I needed to bump up from about $100,000 for demolition to about $200,000 now to get that old building out of the way and clean the block for redevelopment. 21,000 square feet, $200 a square foot, about $4.2 million, a little over $300,000 for associated site development. Adding the project-related soft cost, and it's now at about $6.15 million. So the next site we took a look at was the Triangle site, and there's really only one scenario we've looked at so far. We just said if 21,000 square feet is the model we've been plopping from space to space, how does it fit on this? And this has got about a 2.6 acre site. So it represents a little bit more site area than what currently exists here in current
Boyer.
alternative high school location. So, following this through, 2.63 acres, 21,000 square feet. That's all new construction. There's no remodel. In this scenario, as well as at the high school, I'm not factoring in what you're doing with the existing site, whether that's demolished, whether it's sold on the open market. It's not in the mix at this time. So, building demolition is not applicable. There is, as you saw that photo, there's trees and there's earth that's going to need to be moved. So to what degree, we haven't zeroed in on yet, and that's why I said to be determined, but there are some site development, site preparation costs that need to go in there. But I do have about $420,000 for site work. And I mentioned before that about 7.5%, the reason I took 7.5% is when it's really clean, 5% works for site. When it's messy, 10%. The reason I use 10% is I don't know the availability of utilities at this site to serve a school. We know that those utilities exist at your current site. We know they exist at the middle school, high school. This one's got a little bit more of a variable as to what might we have to deal with for on-site costs, bringing utilities and even some off-site improvements because it's never been a school site. So in this case, I'm using 10% for site development. And when this tracks through, it comes out to about $6 million. So those were the three different sites that we were asked to look at. We exchanged kind of thoughts and information back and forth. And we had 6 of those scenarios, 3 options at the middle school, high school, all of different sizes. And then the 2 options at the current site and the 1 option then at the Triangle site. That's what we've covered so far.
Is it possible to get a copy of this sent to us?
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah.
That
We'll
would
put
be
it all on the
helpful,
website.
Since we need to make a decision.
I feel like I'm getting old.
Everything that's
Can't
put
see.
up here tonight will go on the website.
Okay.
Perfect.
And did you, Sean, did you get an opinion of value on Boyer?
Yes, we did. It's in the $800,000 range for that.
So if we were going to go off-site
We'd
and
sell
we
that.
decide to sell that, that would potentially reduce the cost. Okay.
Now, I think it's important to look at the human factor. I've been working with them for several years and, just being a good citizen with them. And they are not, the faculty and the students, I'm discounting Jeff because I know what he wants, do not want to move to the high school site. They're okay with either work on Boyer or Triangle, but they, and the kids in particular, and I know they've done surveys and stuff, do not want to move. Don't want to go back to the high school because they felt they failed there and they don't want to be back there. So, I mean, that's the human factor, and I don't know what
But,
Is there,
we need to talk about on that.
yeah.
is there a way to factor in, not discounting the current students' survey opinions, but realizing that within a couple years, whatever is the new location becomes the new norm, and it still is a little safer school
It's a-
emotionally than
It's
being
a-
all the way
it's a
in the same high
total
school.
culture change and 10 years. Studies have shown that all over the country that you can't do that. You can't change a culture easily.
It takes some time, you're saying.
10 years, yeah.
And I completely agree with Joan. I'm not a big fan of having
Putting everybody
two
on the same
You know,
campus.
Coeur d'Alene School District doesn't do that. I don't know of a school district right off the top of my head that has them all, okay, here's
On
my
the same
alternative
campus.
school versus my high school and then my middle school. It's just, I think there's a reason that they need their own space in order to be successful.
Thank you.
So it's an Idaho model because in Idaho, it's one of the states that allows enhanced funding for alternative ed. So there's a reason, partial reason why you don't see this more often. In Washington State, for example, it's not uncommon to have alternative high schools sharing sites with secondary schools, and there's more of a go-between and because there's no enhanced funding, there's no incentive to build somewhere else. So it's everything that you guys are saying. I concur with that. It's a very, very, I've been through it in 2 other districts, super emotional topic. The staff has said, we would rather stay in that old building than have a new building anywhere else. I mean, it's a long-standing feeling that they have.
Yeah.
And
I'm tasked with, as you know, thinking about long-term, what are the best things we can do for our students moving on down the line. And one of the options I think we need to look at is, are there more options afforded in a different location for those students that they don't have now? And the answer is yes, without a doubt. But we also know that not all students at LPO would benefit from those options because by definition, most of those students are credit deficient. So they are mostly catching up on the core requirements that they need to catch up with. So I understand that too.
Right.
There's only a handful that are going to be able to go off and
Is it elective option?
yeah, so
Sean, what are the electives that you're alluding to that they can get at the existing high school site that they're not getting right now?
well,
That they won't put, that they're providing now?
you bet.
Oh,
So right now we have both culinary arts and the arts program. At Sound Point High School, I don't know how many electives we have, Mr. Albertson, but
yeah,
more than 20.
that'll work.
From CAD to welding to all the PTE courses that we have, but also foreign language. But again,
How many kids can take
there's
advantage of
not
it?
going to be a
Right.
huge number of
If
students.
you're credit deficient, you're probably not going to be looking at electives.
No,
That's
there's-
what he said,
there's-
yeah.
That's exactly, there's 7 or 8 that probably would, because right now, both the culinary arts classrooms and the fine arts classes have students in them.
Yeah, they do with some.
Yeah.
Well,
And there's one more piece, but Jolene, if I may.
Yes.
This could be something, and this has come to my mind, that, I mean, I hate to say it, but it could be a project that you would consider having in phase 2, even though the building is not good that they're in now. because there's a lot of legwork that could be done around transitioning to a different model that's a little bit more,
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's a hard decision to make in 2 weeks.
yeah, for sure. But without a doubt, staff and students would tell you, please let us stay where we're at. It's
And basically what the staff is afraid of is that students will drop out at 16 if you move them back to the high school. They feel that they have failed there and they don't want to go back.
yeah.
So you're looking at the possibility of,
Well, within a certain number of years, whether it's 3 or 4, there won't be any student in the new site who has a history of having failed at the high school. That simply won't exist because they will have
The new
grandfathered
Well,
out.
unless, well,
the
no, not-
reputation will be set.
It will-
You're saying the culture of it. There won't be a
Or
student,
whatever that they
Yeah.
feel.
I mean,
there won't be a student who's,
Unless they drop out of Sandpoint High School when they're a sophomore and then have to walk over here and take classes, you know what I mean? It's, because they can go back and forth, yeah.
I know, but, you're saying even in upcoming years,
There will always be that
Yeah,
feeling.
from going from a location to another location on the same site, they won't be able to get it.
Right, but we don't
I'm
have
with
to
you.
guess what it would be like,
We don't.
because it's being done in other areas, and so.
Right.
You know, there's places we can look at.
We
and-
can look at other models.
Right, so, do you want to weigh in on if you had a preference?
As far as
There's 1, 2, and 3.
of these options that we presented? Well, I'm also looking at all the projects that we have
Yeah.
on the table to look at.
Yeah,
If we were to do one of the other options, we would be saying that that's going to trump some of the other projects, and we'd have to, from a priority standpoint, say that's a higher priority than some of the other things. So I haven't thought about that. What I've thought about is, in my opinion, it's either have it on that site or delay it into the second phase, because my fear would be you put all that money into that current site, and now, without having the opportunity to have a good conversation about things that people haven't even thought about as far as serving those students, then we're kind of locking ourselves in for 50 years to that model. So those are, from my standpoint today, it would be either let's go for it, let's do it, option A, or wait. That's just my opinion
Wait,
today.
option A, which is on the Sandpoint High School
The
site.
bare bones.
it's the
It's-
location on the middle school, high school property that shares some classroom and elective space and gymnasium space with the existing high school.
Exactly, but a close second for me today is to wait and to move that, because this is going to be a couple of phase project, right, 6, 12, 18 years. That's a close second, because right now, if we push that now, there would be a lot of negativity associated with it, and people would run the risk of suggesting that, wow, that wasn't necessarily fully vetted. And that was my concern. Jacinda was on the facility study committee. Lisa, of course, Mindy was there, and I shared that with our group, that it's a big deal to just say this is what's going to happen on this site. There would be a lot of fallout, and we've already sensed some of it. The staff saying, just leave us alone. We want to be here with our kids. And they're doing a great job today in that building. It's just a terrible building. I mean, good things are happening. So that's where I'm at today, but we'll have time between now and the next meeting. I plan on going to talk to Jeff Penrose. I don't see him here today.
Yeah. I don't-
Talk to staff, talk with Lisa, talk with the other administrators here, Mr. Albertson, and because it's an absolute impact 2 years from now to the Sandpoint High School as well. If we said
Yeah.
it changes things there from a potentially, but not necessarily a staffing standpoint. There's some things to consider.
Has Jeff been involved in the discussions you're planning?
He has
Point
been,
in time,
yes.
In the meetings?
Yes, and he's been at every meeting until this one tonight at the board meetings too.
So phase 2 is approximately 15 years down the road?
6 years?
You're saying 6 years. You're saying at the end of
6 years.
this. Oh, okay. You're just saying
Exactly.
2022.
And I feel comfortable sharing Jeff's standpoint on this. He would agree that having a setting where students could go back and forth, because you move it, you will have more at-risk students from Sandpoint High taking advantage of LPOHS on that campus. Because we have students there that they're not going to set foot either on the campus where it's at today. So I mean, it kind of goes both ways.
Yeah.
He thinks that's the ideal model at some point, to be able to have more options available for all of our students. But he also feels the same way that I do, that maybe it's too much too soon. And so I think he would be pretty close to what I'm saying right now. But he would lean more towards waiting then and having more time to vet this out and delaying. Yeah.
Would we be able to pretty much button that school up then and, make it appropriate until we can wait to
6 years, that
You
would
put money
it'd be
into it.
Matt's.
button it up?
We've done a lot of freshening up to get them by where we're at now. As far as going deeper and putting the retrofitting mechanical ventilation system, there's no fresh air in the building. As far as going to that extreme, that wouldn't be my recommendation at a building that's at that point now. To put ventilation
sink a bunch of money.
system in, you're looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Right.
Maybe, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. It would not at all
Right.
extensive
Yeah.
renovations to something you're looking at remodeling or getting rid of in 6 years. That would fall in the same category as some of the other schools. When I described the smaller projects, I pointed out that we wouldn't go super deep on like Farmington Stidwell or Southside, because those would be phase
The
2
next-
projects, major remodel.
And that's what I was asking with
LPO is
phase
the-
2.
Like the
That's a
lowest
totally
scoring
different
building
phase.
we had. I want to point that out.
Yeah.
I think it was the lowest scoring building we had.
Yes, it was.
So that's
Yeah.
why it rose to the top of the priority lists.
Thanks.
Well,
If
no, go ahead. Looking at
If
you.
in 2 weeks we make a decision either way, pick an option or decide to wait on LPO, what does that do to what we're asking voters for in August?
That would be a great conversation for you all, because you could do one of a couple of things. You could ask the facility study committee to convene,
Maybe move something from phase 2 up or
or the alternative would be to have a lower.
ask for less? Okay, well, it
So-
would impact that.
This is the first one. This is the first one out of the box. And you said you want a decision in 2 weeks. Why can't we? I mean, don't we want to look at this as a total project?
We do just a little bit of a little more direction in 2 weeks. So not necessarily, okay,
Yeah.
we'd like to kind of
Well,
take some things off the table.
Got it.
Perhaps.
So we just want to cull it down to.
yeah, and
yeah.
this is definitely the biggest decision.
The rest are,
The others, we know the locations.
exactly.
And we know that there's not the pushback or the emotional challenges.
Also
Yeah.
middle school.
Yeah,
Yeah, but that's,
the rest have more to do with school placement on the middle school.
yeah, we know their
and-
locations.
But square footage and those kinds of things are they're not going to be the same kind of an issue.
Exactly, different setup.
But I could do this in, I within 2 weeks, can talk with Jeff Penrose. I can set up a meeting to meet with the entire staff out there. Talk with other appropriate administrators, and we could come back with some more information for you all, and perhaps not necessarily a full-on administrative recommendation, but closer than we have today. Today was, here's the options, and I appreciate you pushing me a little bit on it, because I think we need to talk about it.
I
But-
would like to have the teachers, the faculty and staff here for that meeting too. So
They're welcome to come to any of these meetings,
Yeah.
and I will let them know when we have it.
But we would like to have them there.
Yeah, you bet.
Well, I would prefer that the superintendent go meet with them and then come
First.
back, and report on what what the consensus is on that.
Absolutely, we can do that, yeah. And Lisa, would you have anything to add to that? I just want to make sure, from your standpoint, at this point. Sorry to put you on the spot, but.
The only thing I have to add is that Dave and his team are responding to what we've asked
Yes.
specifically for them
Yes,
to
thank
do.
you.
Yeah,
And we appreciate that.
yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Is that our computer?
Yeah,
That's ours. So we have all that stuff. Okay, good.
yeah.
Joel, you've been awful quiet. You have anything?
I'm just digesting everything I've heard tonight.
Okay. You know what's going to help because
I gotta tell you though, that, this thing with LPO, right now my inclination would be to wait.
yeah,
And I recognize it's priority-wise, it's got all of the problems that we're trying to resolve, and, but until we address this issue of the staff and all that kind of stuff, I think it's something we really need to discuss, talk about.
right. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I agree. You ladies have anything else?
No, I really appreciate the information.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
that was really good.
Let me help you.
Yeah, and it'll be nice to have that on the website as we go, because it is very difficult to read from my old tired eyes, but yeah, it's all right. But Kelly's going to put it up, all these things that we've seen up on the screen, she's going to put them on our website so everyone can take a look at them. And then probably try to narrow it down in a couple weeks to give a little bit of direction. Now, are you also working on the middle school?
Yes, we will be. We aren't doing anything yet. We knew this was, our marching orders was first out of the
Yeah,
box.
that's fine. I
Let's
just,
talk about this.
but you're the guy, we
Yeah.
got two different guys. I'm just verifying you're the guy that's going to be doing the
We're slated to work on LPO, Clark Fork, and the middle school.
got it, in that order.
And that's where there's some, you heard me talk a little bit about master planning of the middle school,
Uh-huh.
high school site. We've already given a little bit of thought to what that means. And it's nice that that's under our umbrella. We
Yeah.
can get our arms around all of that.
Well, right, and it's, for me, it'd be difficult to make a decision on the LPO without having knowledge of what's going to happen with the middle school. It's all, if it would all be on the same property, I think we would have to take a look at everything at the same time.
Yeah, and maybe what we can do, we'll also do is talk with Dave about, a good timeline for us to start presenting some of those other things as well. And it may, probably will require a few extra meetings here
Right.
coming up, but.
Right, okay, all right. Dave, great, thank you very much. Thank
you.
Appreciate your
Thank you.
coming
Thank
and
you.
doing such a great job. Do you have anything that you want to wrap up on this, or?
No, I feel like I'm good on moving forward with what I need to do
Yeah.
for the next meeting. Yep,
Okay.
I'm good to
Okay,
go.
okay, good, so we're clear on that.
Yep.
Need a motion for the consent agenda.
I make a motion we approve the consent agenda.
Do we have a second for the consent agenda?
I have a second. I
There we
will
go. We
second
have a
that we
move-
approve the
we have a
consent agenda.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much. Mr. Olson, where are you? There you are. You're gonna, I think you got the next two items, so just go ahead and.
In your board packet, you all should have received a memo outlining some approvals
Yes.
to award some bids. So tonight, you may recommend that the board approve our voice over IP in category 2 services. So just a little background on that. Our voice over IP is again basically our phone service that you find in every classroom. The contract ends June 30th, 2016, and so it's just a renewal, a 3-year renewal with that service with our current provider. We had one bid for that, Netix, no other bidders, which kind of made it nice. They already provide our service and have for the last 3 years. Interestingly enough, we opened it up for bid just to see what we'd get as far as competitiveness goes. We had the option in the contract to extend it. I chose not to do that to see if we could have them be a little more competitive as well, since they were the only bidders they were. So And in the long run, we shaved $2,000 off. So I think that's a
All right.
I don't know how you want to do that. You may go through them both.
Approve one and then the other, or?
Yeah, we'll just go through one at a time.
Okay. Any questions on that?
I make a motion that we approve the Voice over IP award as presented here.
Second.
It's been moved second. Any more questions for Mr. Olson?
Okay, the next one.
Wait,
I'm
Mr. Olson,
sorry.
just a moment. We're going to vote on that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Proceed.
The next one is Category 2 services. Those include Wi-Fi, Wi-Fi, building infrastructure, and kind of networking needs. USAC and the FCC this year opened up Category 2 funding, which supports those items that I just mentioned, to help support rural schools who have really a difficult time building their infrastructure and their wireless networks, just simply due to the cost. So it was recommended to us that we go all in. We take a look at all of our sites, we inventory what we have as far as wireless access points, knowing that our district is in full swing of moving to a one-to-one environment. Take the high school, for example. Our elementary schools have iPads. Those little devices that hang on the ceiling are extremely important for those devices to run. So again, we are encouraged to go for it all in hopes, when you look at the financial considerations, we had 2 bids. One was Pine Cove out of Bozeman, Montana. The other one was from Ednetics. I know that as far as the bids go, Pine Cove did come in at a lower bid. However, they were an out-of-state. They were working on getting some licensing within the state of Idaho, which they did ultimately get, that I received the other day. However, as we look at, although they weren't the lowest bid, Pine Cove just didn't have what we were looking for and what we asked for in our RFP. If we did go with the lowest bid, we would have to change our current environment as far as the access points, because they had offered another AP wireless access device that really wouldn't talk nicely with our other devices that we currently have, as we start to build up our infrastructure within our schools. And so sometimes those things just don't talk nice to one another.
Was that part of the request for proposal request?
Yes,
Did
yes.
they-
We were pretty specific in what we were asking for.
So they basically didn't meet the requirements
They,
of the
they,
bid?
they didn't meet what we were asking for, but we gave them a shot. We were flexible with what they had to offer, and we even contacted them via phone and had a discussion about it.
What was the difference in the bids?
It was about $90,000. So when you look at this $460,000 price tag, do keep in mind that due to E-rate, we are 70% eligible to get part of that funding, which is a substantial
Chunk.
sigh of relief when it comes to that type of money. But extremely important if we're going to continue to work with our Chromebooks at high school, work with our iPads at the elementary levels, to keep everybody connected. It's just helping to build a robust network.
Those funds would come irrespective of who the contractor was, right?
Yeah. And that 70% federal money that comes in on that E-rate is guaranteed. We don't have to apply for it with the
Well,
possibility of not meeting.
Great question. It's never guaranteed. I will be putting together what's called Form 471 upon award of the bid. We will then wait and
Yeah.
see what the FCC does. But I know that the USAC and the FCC is very adamant about making sure that this Category 2 money is being well spent in areas such as ours. And, interestingly enough, when we talk about Category 2 funding, we don't know how long the FCC is going to keep that option around. Right now, there's two categories. There's category 1, there's category 2. They start filling all the category 1 requests first, and then they take that remaining money and start divvying it out to districts. We might not get anything. But whatever we're awarded, we don't have to take it all. It goes back into the kitty.
So if we don't get this 70% E-rate awarded, are we committed to this proposed cost from Agnetics of the 460?
No.
Okay, so if we didn't qualify for whatever reason, or the money wasn't available for that 70% reimbursement, which is a huge, makes a big difference in the decision.
Right. Yeah, we wouldn't
Okay.
commit to anything.
We wouldn't be on the hook for the 460 if we wanted to change.
Yeah, just as a footnote, I suppose, is I'll be meeting with Agnetics this week to talk about other options. I mean, we might decide as we look through this, and each building is allocated a certain amount within this category 2. We might find that, you know what, we can wait. Because whatever's coming in on this 471 form that I'll be filling out is the one that will be awarded through USAC.
So this will take care of our district, period, right? This is a one-time shot thing.
In my opinion, yes.
Okay, so it should get us all golden. And then probably another investment after if we decide to tear down a school, and so on top, we'll have to reconsider again, like maybe another year or two, revisiting again to.
Part of the cost that Dave shared was including all of the infrastructure, technology, et cetera,
the
were built in.
current, but what about the future
Yeah, we could easily take what we have.
stuff?
Oh, yeah, those pieces. Yeah, you absolutely
like all
can.
the I'm talking, the
Yeah.
category 2 stuff. It's all that
Yeah.
cabling and
Yeah.
all that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we would definitely be doing that where it would be, feasible to.
Have cable pulling parties.
Yeah,
Right?
perhaps. And that might
You're
be
doing
something
that.
Mr. Woodward said, that sometimes, as he said, the construction folks have the cabling, we might have the hardware, and just
Oh.
disregard the cabling aspect.
So we're not anticipating much more of a cost then if we
No.
get approved to build new schools? Or
Well, and
re-up?
like at the middle school, it's already on same site within, a very close.
Mhm.
Okay,
Oh, yeah.
do you want us to make a motion? Are we
If
ready?
you'd like to.
I would like to make a motion that we approve of the category 2 E-rate services as proposed with the Agnetics costs.
I just have a quick question.
Wait a second, I want to see if I can find a second.
I'll second.
Yeah, she wait a second. Okay, go ahead.
The urgency of this is what?
I think it's pretty urgent, given the fact that we have over 1,000 Chromebooks at high school, given the fact that we continue to roll out and do have iPad cards, given the fact that right now we have sporadic access points throughout some of our buildings, which limits the connectivity of some of these devices, i.e. iPads. And
What
so-
buildings would that be?
Off the top of my head, frankly, all of them.
Yeah,
Because they are spread out, and a little access point can only handle X number of devices. And when you have 60 devices trying to get on this one access point that can only handle, say, 30 or so, they're fighting for that. So that causes some issues, in my neighboring teacher's room, and then they don't, then they get fed up.
Yeah, during testing times, for instance, we have to be careful as to, we're not going to test the whole school at once. We can't, there may be times that we want to have all students on devices all at once. It's not urgent tonight that you say, yes, if there's questions that we need to research for the next 2 weeks, we can, but specifically let me know what, and we,
Well, I'm just thinking that we have a construction program in the works. We go in and put this in, and all of a sudden we're gonna we're gonna, hopefully, we're gonna demolish the building or something like the middle school, for example. What is gonna be the expense? Is there something that we can include in the construction cost? In the construction itself of the building that we might save by doing it now, or by doing it now?
I think that's a good question, and I guess I kind of had asked a similar question to Mr. Woodward about, what types of technologies are included. For example, are switches and access points included in a new construction, or is cabling? What are our responsibilities as a district as far as providing hardware? If they're going to provide an access point, one access point every third classroom, that's really not the goal that we have as a technology department. Our goal is to have an access point in every classroom. And this request would do that. So we would have those things and we would simply pick them up and move them where they need to.
What we could do for next time is get a cost estimate for just the schools that aren't being touched. We have a lot of schools, 6 of them, that aren't in the mix at all for being considered in the next 6 years. So we could get a breakdown. What if we just focused on those schools, and then we'll find out for the rest of them, what does that look like? Should we be or could we be including the costs into the plant facilities amount, and how does that work?
One, in relation to what you asked on timing, is there an element of capturing some of this FCC money that if we don't capture it, it's not going to be available in a year or 2 or 6? That's kind of
that's
It's hard to tell.
You
that's the
can't know.
question.
Yeah.
The hope is no, but
right.
yeah, that's an unknown.
If we put it off for 4 years and it's not available, that was our loss of capturing some of that 70%.
Yeah, let us do a little bit of research in the next 2
Okay.
weeks on that, and we'll break it down by construction projects as well. And what's E-ratable when you're building a new school versus just, there's a few things that we can
Well,
find
we
out.
could put in the schools what we want in the building by just telling our electrical engineer, this needs to go in there. and-
Yeah,
Right, it's a matter of being reimbursed.
Yeah.
yeah, that's
It's
a
a matter
question.
of capturing the 70%.
And
If I could just add to that, Joel,
Yeah.
is that the other thing that I think we really encourage you to strongly consider is that in some cases, there's contractors that put in technology in buildings don't always put in what's going to mesh well with what we currently have. And it goes back to this idea of Pine Cove versus Etnetics, what they're offering versus what Etnetics
well,
is offering.
yeah, but we're in the driver's
No, but
seat
you
on
can
that.
let
We'll
us
spec it, and they'll put in whatever we tell them to put in. So I'm not worried
Yeah.
about that part of it. But what I would like to know are what are the choke points? In other words, what are the, you must have a building somewhere, you got 100 kids trying to get on
What's the
an
one?
access point with 50.
Clark Fork, Northside,
Hope.
Farman, Hope.
High school at times, Tom, is that correct? At times, the high school is an issue, depending upon how many devices are being used.
See, to me, the consideration here is we've fully embraced this one-on-one and all this technology, but it's like buying 60 cars and giving 30 of them gasoline.
Yeah.
I mean, what'd you buy 60 cars for?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to be out of business for whatever period of time we're talking about too. So what you're saying is, if we put this off to the next meeting, it's not going to
We'll still
adversely
meet-
impact.
Meet the deadline for A-rate, okay.
So my question is, do
Joan had a
we table this or withdraw it?
Joan still had
We
a
can just
question.
table it, right?
I have
Doesn't
a
have to withdraw
question.
it.
I guess been on the school board a long enough time to know that we've been through several computer upgrades, et cetera. What are you looking at as before the next bright idea comes down the computer chain? I mean, what's the life of this programs you want to put in?
As far as a Chromebook initiative, or
Yeah, I think I can answer.
Is it going
I
to
think
be
I can answer.
outdated in 6 years or 7 years or 2 years?
that's a good question. I think the last, right now in regards to, I don't know the history of when the last access points were put into schools. I know that this past E-rate year for 15-16, funding was approved for 35 access points in hopes to reach this goal of an access point in every classroom. That being said, again, not knowing the history, what we're experiencing right now is that our switches, the piece of equipment that all of our cables are plugged into to make everything talk, is reaching its end of life. That also comes into play within this consideration.
Well, if we,
I don't know off the top of my head when that was.
yeah, if we
7
start,
years ago?
what do you think the active life is for the equipment you want to purchase now? I mean,
I'd say a good 10 years, easily.
okay, 10 years is good. That's good enough.
So you need to table this or withdraw it. Can we?
And you'll get that broken out,
Yeah.
schools not
Withdraw.
under construction as opposed to those impacted by, because that might make it a two-phase project also.
Yeah.
Okay.
So who made the original motion?
I made the original
wanna
motion,
withdraw
so
it,
I'd
or-
like to withdraw the motion to approve the Category 2 E-rate services.
Okay. And then we'll put it on the agenda for next week.
You bet.
Talk about that, and we'll get more info. Thank you, Eric.
Sounds good.
Appreciate
Thanks,
that. Okay.
Thanks, Eric.
And you know what? I think, wait. You stole Tom's thunder last time.
Yeah,
I'm
Tom,
gonna let him go first.
Remember, you weren't at the North Idaho Sports Banquet, right? So, okay,
All
thank you.
right, go ahead.
You're first.
Just wanted to give accolades to the Sanborn High School staff and especially the counseling department for pretty much a flawless SAT day. So today was the day where all juniors in the state of Idaho took the SAT test. Really, it's a big undertaking, and we had very few issues with students at all not wanting to take it. They actually were, take pride in it, and so I was very, very, very pleased with the day. Also, the journalism Cedar Coast group will be taking a trip to the national convention, and we do have one student, Sarah Wells, who will be receiving a national award at there. So I want to give kudos to Sarah. So spring sports are in full swing and busy, and we're heading into the fourth quarter.
Yeah, home stretch.
Good.
I'll forget something anyway, so you might have to add to this. So I have been to the North Idaho Sports Award Banquet 4 times now, and this last time I was like, I don't know if I want to go. It's long. If you've never been there before, the McCoys were there last year, and I thought, no, I'm going. I'll go. We have a lot of kids nominated. My daughter was nominated for something, so that's cool. Anyways, long story short, every year the Sandpoint section is the biggest section in that. It's all of North Idaho, represented.
Good.
And we had so many coaches and kids nominated for awards this year. And just to be nominated is awesome. But we also had some really big awards. One, the Sandpoint girls cross country team was recognized as the female team of the year in North Idaho, which is sweet. Peyton Bacoe was swimmer of the year in North Idaho. We also had Maddie Schoening was athlete of, or she was female athlete of the year, but she also won basketball player of the year this year, and then she went back up for the overall athlete of the year, and then Paul Sundquist was the overall athlete of the year for North Idaho as well, and this includes all 4 and 5A. So I think that's pretty unusual. I was trying to look back. I don't think that's ever happened where a Sandpoint. And Casey was wrestler of the year. I knew I'd forget something. Thank you so much. Casey, I apologize. He'll watch this. So, and he could whoop me, I'll tell you that. Right now. So, but did I miss anybody? I mean, there were a lot of people nominated as well, but it was
That's great.
very cool. So that's all I have.
All right, that's it. That's a lot. That's great.
Thank you.
Okay, we're all good.
Dr. Meyer?
Dr. Meyer.
What? Did you have something?
I just wanted to say I was at the middle levels conference last night today, and you would just be super proud of our district. I was telling Tom as we were sitting here, the day was done, and I was talking to somebody, and you look over, the entire room, I'm not kidding you, disperses, and the thing got over, and here is Casey McLaughlin and 3 of his teachers working away the entire room. I mean, I was so proud. I was like, why am I leaving? These are the only people still working here, and they're just totally into it. It was such a proud moment that this is a really good district, and I just wanted everyone to know it's really good district.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Meyer. Well, thank you all for coming, certainly appreciate it. We're done,
All
okay?
right, good one.